Hey guys, tonight we dive into the chilling world of medieval punishment, where justice wasn't just swift, it was a spectacle designed to haunt the living. Imagine stepping out of a swirling mist onto cobblestone streets slick with rain, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and unwashed wool, as distant church bells toll like a warning. You're in 14th century England, and right away you spot a shadowy figure dangling high above the city gate in an iron cage, swaying gently in the wind, a grim reminder that crossing the law here means more than a slap on the wrist. You probably won't believe the terrifying truth of this story, how ordinary folks like you could end up in such a device, not for glory, but for utter shame. So before you continue listening to my story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I know you're still listening along with me. You trudge forward, your boots squelching in the muddied path leading into a bustling town, let's say York, with its towering minster piercing the gray sky like a jagged tooth. The year is around 1320, during the reign of Edward II, a time when the Black Death hasn't yet ravaged the land, but famine and unrest simmer like a pot about to boil over. As a time traveler, you've landed smack in the heart of medieval England, where life pulses with raw energy, but danger lurks in every shadow. The landscape unfolds before you, rolling green hills dotted with sheep, dense forests whispering secrets, and rivers snaking through villages of thatched roof huts. But it's the people who draw your eye: peasants in rough tunics hauling carts, merchants haggling over spices, and knights in clinking chainmail riding past on destriers that snort clouds of breath into the chill air. You feel the weight of the era immediately, a place where survival hinges on rigid hierarchies and unforgiving laws. Society is divided into three estates: those who fight, those who pray, and those who work. Yet, as you mingle in the marketplace, inhaling the mingle of fresh-baked bread and rotting refuse, you sense the undercurrents of tension. Kings like Edward II wield absolute power, but rebellions brew, and justice serves as the crown's iron fist to keep order. You overhear whispers about traitors and thieves, and your gaze drifts upward again to that ominous cage, the gibbet, or hanging cage, as it's come to be known in tales of terror. These devices aren't mere relics, they're active tools in the brutal justice system you're now immersed in. You arrive just as a crowd gathers near the town square, where a wooden scaffold stands like a skeletal sentinel. A mainstream historical fact hits you. In 14th century England, hanging was the standard execution for common crimes like theft, with bodies often displayed post-mortem to deter others, as detailed in chronicles from the time. But the hanging cage takes it further, encasing the condemned victims alive, though that's rarer here, in iron bars, hoisted high for public view. It's not just death, it's prolonged humiliation, the body or person left to the elements, birds pecking at flesh while passers-by jeer or cross themselves in fear. As you edge closer, the sensory assault intensifies. The creak of ropes, the metallic tang of blood on the wind, and the low murmur of the mob. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind: some cages were custom forged by local blacksmiths, occasionally adorned with spikes or chains that rattled like ghostly maracas in the breeze, adding an eerie soundtrack to the punishment. You chuckle softly to yourself, thinking how modern horror movies have nothing on this real-life setup. It's like nature's own jump scare, with crows as the special effects team. But sarcasm aside, in this sleepy ASMR cadence, let's ease into the reality. You're safe for now, but one wrong move, like pocketing a loaf from that baker's stall, and you could be next. Scholars debate whether these cages emerged purely as deterrents or if they reflected a deeper societal need for ritualistic shaming, with some arguing the practice borrowed from ancient Roman exposures, evolving in England during the chaotic years after the Norman conquest. You ponder this as you navigate the narrow streets, dodging horse droppings and street vendors peddling pies that smell suspiciously gamey. The justice system here is a patchwork of royal edicts and local customs, enforced by sheriffs who patrol with grim efficiency. You spot one now, his badge glinting, questioning a ragged beggar reminding you that poverty isn't just hardship, it's a potential crime. Dipping into a dimly lit tavern for respite, you sip watery ale from a wooden mug, the foam tickling your nose as flames crackle in the hearth. Patrons share tales of infamous cases, like that of a poacher from last year, caged alive near the crossroads until starvation claimed him, his cries echoing for days. You lean in, feeling the warmth contrast the cold dread outside. A light joke bubbles up. Imagine if social media existed back then. Instead of cancel culture, it'd be cage culture, with villagers liking the spectacle by throwing rotten veggies. But seriously, folks, in this era, public humiliation is the ultimate viral punishment, spreading fear faster than any plague. As night falls, you find lodging in a modest inn, the straw mattress prickling your skin through thin sheets. Lying there, you hear distant house wolves, or just the wind teasing those iron bars. The hanging cage's emergence ties back to the need for visible control in a fractured kingdom. After events like the peasants' revolt later in the century, though you're early for that, authorities ramped up displays to quash dissent. You drift off, imagining the cage's origins, perhaps inspired by battlefield trophies, where enemies' bodies were hung from trees, evolving into forged iron for durability. Another quirky fringe, some believed the souls of the cage lingered, haunting the spot, leading villagers to avoid certain roads after dark, superstition blending with justice in a cozy, creepy mix. Waking to dawn's light filtering through shuttered windows, you step out again, the town stirring with roosters crowing and blacksmith hammers ringing. The justice system envelops you fully now. You witness a minor trial in the marketplace, where a man accused of slander is sentenced to the pillory, his head and hands locked in wooden stocks for mockery. But the hanging cage looms larger in your mind, reserved for graver offenses like treason or murder. A mainstream fact anchors it. Records from Edward I's reign show increased use of post-execution displays to assert royal authority. Bodies quartered and sent to cities, sometimes caged for emphasis. You wander toward the city walls, the stone cold under your fingers, graffiti etched by bored guards. A gentle sarcasm creeps in, a medieval multitasking, walls for defense and free advertising of the king's wrath. Scholars openly debate if this brutality fostered obedience or bred resentment, fueling cycles of violence. One light joke: if therapy existed, the executioner would need a lifetime supplement talk about job stress. Yet, in this immersive world, you feel the pulse of an era where hanging cages first clawed their way into the justice arsenal, tools of terror born from a need to publicly break the spirit. Pushing deeper into the day, you join a procession to a nearby execution site, the crowd's energy electric, a mix of morbid curiosity and pious dread. The condemned, a thief caught red-handed, is led in chains, his face ashen. No cage for him today, just the noose, but whispers hint at worse for repeat offenders. You inhale the earthy scent of trampled grass, taste salt on the wind from distant seas. As the trap drops, a hush falls, broken by gasps. In the aftermath, the officials discuss gibbeting the body, hoisting it in a fresh-forged cage at the town's edge. This is your entry into the shadowy past, where hanging cages emerge not overnight but through centuries of escalating punishments, perfected in this brutal system. You retreat, heart-pounding, blending back into the throng, but the image sears your mind, the iron grip of medieval justice, waiting to ensnare the unwary. As the crowd disperses from the execution site, you weave through the thinning throng, your pulse still racing from the spectacle, and find yourself drawn toward the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil echoing from a nearby forge. The air grows thicker here, heavy with the acrid bite of smoke and molten iron, mingling with the earthy dampness of the ground underfoot. You've stumbled upon the heart of where these terrifying instruments are born, blacksmith's workshop, tucked against the town wall like a brooding sentinel. In this era, where justice is as much about show as substance, the hanging cage isn't just a punishment, it's a crafted masterpiece of intimidation. And right now, You're about to witness one taking shape for some poor soul who's crossed the wrong lord. You step closer, the heat from the forge washing over you like a feverish wave, making your skin prickle as sparks dance in the dim light. The blacksmith, a burly man with arms like knotted oak and a soot-streaked face, pauses to wipe sweat from his brow with a rag that looks like it's seen better centuries. He's working on what will become the iron grip of the hanging cage, bending red-hot bars over his anvil with precise, thunderous strikes. Imagine this. In modern times, we'd 3D print a gadget for fun, but here, they're forging custom terror device. Talk about artisanal craftsmanship gone dark. You can't help but chuckle softly to yourself, thinking how this guy's resume would read: expert in medieval mood lighting. Via fear. The design unfolds before you, simple yet sinister in its efficiency. The cage starts as a series of iron hoops, forged from bars heated in the roaring fire until they glow like embers from hell itself. These hoops form the skeletal frame, wider at the shoulders, tapering at the feet to encase a human form snugly, preventing escape or collapse as the elements do their work. Vertical bars are riveted in place, necks crossing like prison bars but curved to hub the body, with chains welded at the top for hoisting. You reach out tentatively, your fingers brushing the cooling metal. It's rough, unforgiving, still warm enough to send a shiver up your arm despite the forge's blaze. Sensory overload hits metallic tang on your tongue, the sizzle of water quenching hot iron steam rising like ghostly whispers. A mainstream historical fact anchors this grim scene. In 14th century England, such displays were mandated for high treason under laws like those enforced during Edward I's campaigns, where traitors' bodies were hung in chains or frames after quartering, their remains exhibited at city gates to warn potential rebels, as recorded in royal statutes. But here's where it gets quirky. Some cages included hinged doors, or adjustable spikes inside, not to harm but to secure limbs, and fringed tales whisper of blacksmiths etching curses into the metal, believing it would trap the condemned spirit forever, turning the cage into a supernatural jail. You smirk at the thought. If ghosts were real, these things would be like eternal timeshares for the undead, prime real estate with a view of the crossroads. As the blacksmith hammers away, shaping a chain link that rattles like bones in the wind, you overhear him grumbling to his apprentice about the commission from the sheriff. This particular cage is for a condemned forger, caught minting fake coins, and it's being prepared to hang high above the market square, where everyone can see the price of deceit. You imagine the process. Once complete, the cage will be coated in pitch or tar to weatherproof it, preserving the spectacle longer. Modern ascetites like wrapping leftovers in foil, but instead of saving food, it's saving fear for the community. Potluck of justice. The apprentice, a lanky lad with wide eyes, fetches more coal, and you feel the ground vibrate with each bellows pump, the air pulsing with heat that makes your eyelids heavy in this ASMR haze. Scholars openly debate whether these cages truly deterred crime or merely satisfied a bloodthirsty public, with some arguing the practice stemmed from ancient exposure rituals, adapted in England to reinforce feudal loyalty amid constant wars. You ponder this as you circle the forge, dodging a spray of sparks that fizzle out on the dirt floor. The design isn't uniform. Some cages are basket-like for full enclosure, others more like harnesses of chains wrapped around the body. But all serve the same purpose: to elevate humiliation into the sky, where wind and rain accelerate the macabre show. A light joke slips in. Picture the condemned complaining about the fit like a bad tailor, but with eternal consequences instead of a refund. You linger, watching the final rivets hammered home, the cage now standing upright on the workbench, its bars casting long shadows that stretch like accusing fingers. The blacksmith tests the hinges with a creak that echoes through your bones, oiling them to ensure smooth operation when the time comes. Feel the weight of it as he lifts a section, solid, unyielding, designed to outlast the flesh it will contain. In this sleepy cadence, let's ease into the details. The top hoop often features a hook for the hanging chain, While the base might have a great toolette, well, remnants fall through a practical touch in an impractical horror. Another gentle sarcasm, medieval efficiency at its finest, because who has time for cleanup when there's a kingdom to intimidate? As dusk creeps in, painting the sky in bruised purples, you step back from the forge, the clang fading behind you like a distant dream. But the image lingers, this iron beast cold and ready awaiting its victim. The preparation is meticulous, from selecting sturdy iron or mined from nearby hills to forging under the watchful eye of guild rules, ensuring no weak links literally. A third light joke bubbles up if online shopping existed. This would be in the home security category, with reviews like 5 stars, kept the rebels away, yet, in truth, it's a tool born of a society where public shaming binds communities tighter than any chain. You turn away, the forge's glow warming your back as you rejoin the street, but the iron grip tightens in your mind. The cage, now nearly complete, stands as a testament to the year's blend of ingenuity and cruelty, prepared for the condemned soul who will soon feel its embrace. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of cooling metal, a reminder that in this world, justice isn't blind, it's on full display, swinging for all to see. You drift along the winding street, the forge's fading heat giving way to a crisp breeze that rustles your cloak and carries the murmur of distant voices, pulling you toward the heart of the town, where the air buzzes with anticipation. The cobblestones under your feet lead you straight to the manor house, repurposed today as a makeshift courtroom, its stone facade looming like a stern judge itself. You've timed your arrival perfectly, or perhaps unluckily, as a trial is about to unfold, one that could seal a fate in that freshly forged cage you just witnessed being born. The crowd presses in, a sea of woolen hoods and curious faces, and you squeeze through the heavy oak doors into a chamber thick with the scent of beeswax candles and unwashed bodies, the low ceiling amplifying every whisper into a hum that vibrates in your chest. You find a spot against the wall, the rough plaster cold against your back, as the room fills with townsfolk eager for the drama. Benches creak under the weight of spectators, and sunlight filters through narrow windows and dusty shafts, illuminating the raised days where the judge, a portly man in a fur-trimmed robe, settles with a gavel that looks more like a blacksmith's knot. The accused stands chained in the center, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes, accused of treason, whispering against the king during a tavern brawl, or so the rumors go. You feel the tension coil like a spring, the air heavy with judgment, and in this ASMR whisper of history, let's ease into the proceedings. The clerk calls order, his voice a monotonous drone that lulls you deeper into the scene. The trial begins with a flourish of parchments rustled by the prosecutor, a sharp-faced man whose words slice through the room like a blade. He recounts the crime. The defendant, a local miller named Thomas, allegedly spread seditious tales about Edward II's failures in Scotland, inciting unrest among the peasants. Witnesses shuffle forward, one by one, a barmaid with nervous hands twisting her apron, a fellow drinker who swears on the Bible with a tremor in his voice. You inhale the faint aroma of ink from the scribe's quill, scratching notes, taste the dryness of fear on your tongue as Thomas denies it all, his voice cracking like brittle wood. Modern aside, it's like a medieval episode of courtroom TV, but without the commercial, straight to the verdict, no appeals in sight. A mainstream historical fact grounds the chaos. In 14th century England, trials for felony crimes were often swift under the common law system established post-Norman conquest, with juries of 12 local men deciding guilt based on reputation and evidence, as outlined in legal treatises like Bracton's. But here's the quirky tidbit: some defendants invoke benefit of clergy, claiming literacy to escape secular courts by reading a Bible verse, though fringe stories tell of illiterate folks memorizing just one psalm, turning trials into bizarre recitation contests. You smirk gently. Imagine bombing a spelling bee where the prize is avoiding the news talk about high-stakes homework. As arguments fly, you shift on your feet, the stone floor sending a chill up your legs, while the crowd murmurs approvals or boos like an unruly audience. The judge leans forward, his jowls quivering as he questions Thomas directly, probing for confessions with promises of mercy that ring hollow. Sensory details envelop you, the flicker of candle flames casting elongated shadows that dance like accusing specters, the occasional cough echoing off the walls, and the metallic clink of the prisoner's chains as he gestures in vain. A light joke slips in. If this were a game show, the host would say, "Thomas, for the cage or freedom? What's your final answer?" But sarcasm softens. Poor guy, his fate hanging by a thread thinner than a spider's web. Scholars openly debate whether these trials prioritized truth or spectacle, with some contending the system favored the powerful, biasing verdicts against commoners in an era rife with corruption. You ponder this as the jury huddles in a corner, their whispers a low buzz like bees in a hive, deliberating under the judge's watchful eye. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours, the room growing stuffier, sweat beading on foreheads despite the autumn chill seeping through cracks. Finally, the foreman stands, his face grave, declaring guilty in a tone that seals the deal. No room for doubt, no second chances. The sentence comes swiftly, the judge's voice booming like thunder in the confined space. For treason's whisper, death by hanging, but with a twist, the body to be displayed in the new hanging cage at the city gate, a public humiliation to warn all who pass. You feel a collective gasp ripple through the crowd, some nodding in grim satisfaction, others averting eyes in pity. Thomas slumps, his shoulders sagging as guards drag him toward the door, chains rattling a dirge. In this sleepy cadence, picture the weight of adult verdict not just ending a life, but extending shame beyond the grave. A call back to that iron beast you saw forged, now destined for this very soul. You follow the procession out, the sunlight blinding after the dim chamber, as Thomas is bundled into a cart for the short ride to the scaffold. The street swells with more onlookers, children peeking from doorways, vendors pausing their cries to watch. Another light joke bubbles up, justice served faster than a medieval drive-through, but with zero satisfaction guarantee. Yet, the reality sinks in crime, a mere murmur of discontent amplified in a time when loyalty is currency, and verdicts are etched in iron. You trail behind, heart heavy, the courtroom's echoes fading but the sentence's shadow lengthening ahead. As the cart rumbles away, you linger on the periphery, absorbing the aftermath. Families weeping, officials congratulating themselves with slaps on the back. The quirky fringe lingers in your mind, tales of spectral juries haunting unjust trials, ghosts replaying verdicts eternally. Gentle sarcasm, our eternity's own appeal court, where the dead get the last word. But push forward, the trial's done, the cage awaits its occupant, and you, time traveler, bear witness to how words can forge chains stronger than any blacksmith's hammer. The cart jolts to a halt at the base of the scaffold, its wheels sinking into the soft earth churned by countless feet, and you press closer through the swelling crowd, the air now electric with a mix of dread and morbid excitement that prickles your skin like static before a storm. Thomas, the condemned miller, is hauled out roughly by the guards, his chains clanking a final protest as he's led up the wooden steps that creak ominously underfoot. You followed this far, invisible in your time traveler's guise, but now the reality sharpens. Cage, that iron monstrosity you saw forged, stands ready nearby, its bars glinting dully in the overcast light, waiting to claim its prize. As the noose is swept over his head, you can't help but imagine the twist. What if it were you up there, the rough hemp scratching your neck, the world tilting as the trapdoor beckons? You blink, and in that moment, the scene shifts. Not Thomas, but you hoisted toward the cage after a botched execution or a sentence of live exposure. The crowd's jeers rising like a tidal wave crashing against your ears. Feel the guards' calloused hands gripping your arms, propelling you forward as the mob parts just enough to let you through, their faces a blur of snarls and wide-eyed fascination. The scaffold looms taller now, its timbers scarred from years of use, and the cage dangles from a chain hooked to a sturdy beam overhead, swaying gently like a pendulum counting down your fate. In this ASMR drift, let's slow it down. The wind whispers through the bars, a soft rustle of leaves nearby, grounding you in the sensory haze as your heart thuds a steady rhythm against your ribs. They force you into the cage, the door swinging open with a groan that echoes in your bones, and you step insidious rather, or shoved cold iron pressing against your back like an unwelcome embrace from a long-lost relative. The bars enclose you swiftly, the latch clicking shut with finality, and suddenly, you're confined, your world reduced to this cramped cylinder barely wide enough for your shoulders. You grasp at the metal, fingers curling around the rough welds, feeling the chill seep into your skin as if the cage itself is alive, drawing warmth from your body. Modern aside, it's like being stuffed into a medieval escape room. But the only puzzle is surviving the audience scene. Spoiler, there's no emergency exit. As the chain rattles upward, hauled by a team of burly men grunting with effort, you rise slowly into the air, the ground falling away inch by inch until you're suspended high above the square. The crowd below shrinking to ant-like figures, yet their voices amplifying into a cacophony of mockery. "Traitor," one shouts, hurling a rotten apple that splatters against the bars, its juice dripping down like sticky tears. Others laugh, pointing fingers, while a few cross themselves and mutter prayers, their pity fleeting as entertainment wins out. You sway in the breeze, the motion nauseating at first, a gentle rock that lulls you into a disorienting trance. Up here, isolation bites harder than any chain, exposure turning every glance into a blade. A mainstream historical fact settles in amid the chaos. During the 14th century, gibbeting alive was occasionally used for particularly heinous crimes like piracy or treason, as seen in cases under Edward III's rule, where the condemned were left in cages to starve while on public display, prolonging suffering as a deterrent. But the quirky tidbit adds a layer. Some cages were positioned at crossroads, fringe beliefs holding that spirits of the hanged couldn't cross running water or paths, trapping them eternally in limbo. A supernatural add-on to the physical torment. You chuckle faintly to yourself, dangling there. Imagine ghost traffic jams at intersections, zero gridlock for the afterlife. The jeers continue, a relentless barrage that wears on your spirit like sandpaper on wood. Children mimic your posture. Adults weave tales of your crimes exaggerated with each retelling. Sensory immersion deepens. The sun peeks through clouds, warming the iron until it burns your palms, while rain threatens, promising to turn your perch into a dripping misery. You taste the salt of sweat on your lips, smell the faint rot from previous occupants lingering in the bars, hear the creak of the chain like a mocking lullaby. A light joke eases the tension. If this were a theme park ride, it'd be called the Humiliator, with a sign reading "Must be this guilty to ride." Gentle sarcasm whispers. The original reality show, where ratings are measured and thrown produce. Scholars openly debate if such public humiliations fostered communal unity through shared spectacle, or merely desensitized society to cruelty, with arguments tracing back to whether it mirrored biblical exposures or evolved from Viking-era displays. You ponder this as the hours blur, your legs aching from the awkward stance, no room to sit or lie, just endless standing in this vertical coffin. Isolation creeps in like fog over the moors. Up here, you're cut off from touch, from whispers of comfort, left to your thoughts that spiral into regret and despair. The crowd thins as evening approaches, but stragglers linger, their lanterns flickering like fireflies below, casting your shadow long and distorted against the town wall. Exposure begins its slow torment. Hunger knows first, a hollow ache in your belly, thirst following as the sun bakes moisture from your tongue. Birds circle curiously, their wings slicing the air with sharp whooshes, eyeing you as potential prey. For now they perch on the cage's top, cooing mockingly. Another light joke bubbles up. Talk about room service, feathered waiters serving nothing but attitude. But in truth, the real agony is the shame, etched into every stare, every whisper carried on the wind, reminding you that this isn't just punishment, it's erasure. reducing you to a symbol swinging in the void. As night falls, stars prick the sky like distant judgments, and the cold descends, wrapping around you tighter than the bars. You shiver, the metal leaching heat until numbness sets in, your breath fogging in puffs that dissipate quickly. Down below, the town quiets, but occasional footsteps echo, guards patrolling or thrill seekers sneaking peeks. The torment builds layer by layer, physical erosion from weather, mental unraveling from solitude, emotional flaying from the jeers that echo in your mind even in silence. A third light joke softens the edge. If meditation apps existed, this would be the extreme version. Find your zen while the world throws tomatoes. Yet, in this suspended state, callbacks flicker, forges heat now a distant memory, the courtroom's verdict a chain linking you here. The cage's design amplifies it all, open enough for visibility, closed enough for entrapment, a perfect vessel for eternal shame. You hang on, literally, as dawn creeps in with rosy fingers, promising another day of exposure, the crowd reforming like clockwork. Isolation and torment intertwine, a dance as old as justice itself, and you, caught in its rhythm, feel the weight of history pressing down. Dawn's light filters through the bars like hesitant fingers, painting your skin in pale stripes as the town awakens below, and you brace for another cycle in this agonizing display, your body already protesting the night's chill that has settled deep into your bones like an uninvited guest. Suspended here in the hanging cage, the world moves on without you, but you're the unwilling star of the show, enduring wave after wave of torment that erodes you from the inside out. Hunger gnaws first, a persistent ache in your gut that started as a whisper yesterday but now roars like a beast. Your last meager meal, a scrap of bread tossed by a pitying guard long since digested into nothing. You lick cracked lips, tasting the dryness of thirst amplified by the sun climbing higher, its rays turning the iron around you into a slow baking oven that makes sweat bead and trickle, only to evaporate in the breeze, leaving you shivering in paradox. You shift slightly, but the cage allows no real movement. Your legs cramp from standing endlessly, muscles screaming for relief that won't come, while the bars dig into your shoulders like accusatory prods. Sensory details assault you relentlessly. The creak of the chain overhead as wind sways you gently, a motion that once lulled, but now induces queasiness. The distant clang of market bells calling vendors to set up stalls, their cries floating up like taunts, the acrid scent of smoke from hearth fires mingling with the earthy rot of refuse in the streets below. Modern aside, it's like being stuck in the world's worst standing desk job, but instead of ergonomic adjustments, you get weather as your boss, unpredictable and always demanding overtime. As the crowd gathers anew, their faces upturned in a mosaic of curiosity and contempt, the public scorn reignites like embers poked to life. Look at the fool, a merchant bellows, pausing his cart to point, while children mimic your hunched posture, giggling as if it's a game. Rotten vegetables arc through the air, splattering against the bars with wet thuds, their juices seeping through to stain your tattered clothes. Humiliation in edible form. You avert your eyes, but their words pierce anyway, whispers of your supposed crimes twisted into legends, painting you as a monster to justify their glee. In this ASMR hush, let's soften the edges. Voices blend into a low murmur, almost rhythmic, but the sting lingers, chipping away at your resolve like rain on stone. A mainstream historical fact anchors your suffering. In medieval England, gibbeting could last days or weeks for those sentenced alive, as documented in assize records from the 1300s, where the condemned were provided minimal sustenance to prolong the spectacle and maximize deterrence. But here's the quirky tidbit. Fring accounts from folklore suggest some victims survived longer by catching rainwater in their mouths or even insects buzzing near the cage, turning desperation into a macabre survival hack that blurred the line between punishment and unintended mercy. You manage a faint chuckle to yourself. Imagine the Yelp review 0 stars for ambience, but the bug buffet was surprisingly protein-packed. Gentle sarcasm drifts in on nature's drive-through. serving up humility with a sight of flies. Weather turns foe as clouds gather, unleashing a sudden downpour that soaks you to the core, the rain hammering the iron roof. Your cage has won like tiny drums in a relentless symphony. Water cascades down the bars, pooling at your feet before dripping away, leaving you drenched and chilled, your teeth chattering as feverish shivers set in. When the sun returns, it steams your clothes into a humid prison, breeding discomfort that itches and festers. Hunger deepens into weakness, your vision blurring at the edges, thoughts fragmenting into pleas for and anything to escape this limbo. The mental anguish creeps like ivy. Isolation breeds hallucinations, shadows below morphing into familiar faces from your past, judging silently while regret loops endlessly, replaying the moments that led here. Scholars openly debate whether prolonged displays like this truly broke the spirit for moral reform or merely amplified societal cruelty, with some positing it as a precursor to modern psychological warfare tactics. You ponder this amid the haze, your mind wandering to escape the present, perhaps dreaming of fields you once walked freely, the scent of fresh hay now of phantom teas. That reality snaps back with a fresh barrage from below, a group of youths hurling pebbles that ping off the bars, their laughter echoing up like cruel applause. Another light joke eases in. If this were a concert, you'd be the headliner in the splash zone, but tickets come with free tomatoes instead of merch. As midday peaks, exhaustion weighs heavier than the chains, your head lolling against the bars, the metal branding your forehead with its cold kiss. Public scorn evolves. Passers offer furtive prayers, tossing crusts that you strain to catch through the gaps, a fleeting kindness amid the storm. But most revel in the display, using you as a cautionary tale whispered to misbehaving children. Be good, or end up like that wretch. The battle rages on, against hunger that hollows you out, weather that whips without mercy, and scorn that strips your dignity layer by layer. Sensory overload builds metallic tang of blood from bitten lips, the itch of lice stirred by the damp, the endless sway that disorients like a ship at sea. Twilight brings a brief respite, the crowd thinning as lanterns flicker to life below, casting your cage in elongated shadows that dance mockingly. Yet anguish persists. Night amplifies the cold, wind howling through the bars like accusatory ghosts, while mental torment peaks in the dark, doubts whispering louder than any jeer. A third light joke bubbles softly. Talk about a room with a view, panoramic shame, all-inclusive suffering, no checkout time. But in truth, each hour etches deeper, the cage not just containing your body but corroding your soul. A testament to an era where justice meant making examples that lingered long after the flesh failed. You endure as stars will overhead, the town's lights winking out one by one, leaving you in solitary vigil. Callbacks haunt the forge's fire, now a cruel irony against this chill, the courtroom's echoes fueling your inner trial. Physical pain merges with mental fog, hunger a constant companion, weather an unpredictable tormentor. Scorn the audience that never sleeps. Days blend into an eternal now, your world shrunk to this iron womb of woe. Battling on as the first hints of another dawn promise renewal of torment. That is, the agonizing display grinds forward, a slow erosion that tests the limits of human endurance, leaving you swaying in the balance. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the square like accusing fingers. And from your perch in the hanging cage, you turn your weary gaze downward, observing the townsfolk as they orbit your spectacle like moths to a flame, their reactions a tapestry of human emotion woven into the fabric of communal judgment. Days have blurred into this endless vigil, your body a numb vessel of pain, but now the focus sharpens on the mob, the audience to your torment, whose voices rise and fall in a symphony of pity, glee, and everything in between. You sway gently, the chain creaking a soft accompaniment, as a group of merchants pauses below, their richly dyed cloaks fluttering in the breeze, pointing up at you with gloved hands while murmuring about the king's justice served. You watch a woman in a simple kirtle, her face lined with hardship, clutch a basket of herbs and pause to stare, her eyes softening with a flicker of compassion. She tosses a small apple upward, not in mockery but mercy, though it falls short, rolling into the dirt where a stray dog snatches it. Others aren't so kind, a cluster of apprentices, faces smeared with workshop grime, erupt in laughter, hurling insults like fools perch for a traitor's soul, as they mimic your confined stance, bending their arms awkwardly for comic effect. Censer waves wash over you, the earthy scent of fresh turned soil from nearby gardens mingling with the sharp tang of ale on their breaths. Carried up on the wind, the distant peal of church bells tolling vespers, a reminder that life pulses on below while yours hangs suspended. In this ASMR hush, let's linger on the details. Their voices blend into a low hum, almost soothing if not for the barbs hidden within, as the crowd swells and thins with the hours, turning your cage into the town's unwilling centerpiece. A mainstream historical fact grounds the scene. In 14th century England, public executions and displays were communal events, often drawing entire villages, as recorded in chroniclers like Froissart, who noted how such spectacles reinforced social order by uniting the populace in shared condemnation. But here's the quirky tidbit: fring folklore whispers of cage curses, where villagers believed taunting the condemned too harshly could invite the victim's spirit to haunt them, leading some to spit warding charms or toss protective herbs instead of rotten food, blending glee with superstitious fear. You observe the glee most vividly in a boisterous group of laborers, fresh from the fields with mud-caked boots, who gather to share jests at your expense. Slaps his knee, roaring, "He's got the best view in town, but no oil to toast it." Their laughter echoes up, a cruel balm to your isolation, making you flinch inwardly as pebbles ping off the bars like erratic rain. Modern aside, it's like being the punchline in a medieval comedy club, where the cover charge is your dignity and the hecklers never tip. Gentle sarcasm drifts in, community bonding at its finest. Nothing says neighborhood watch like watching a neighbor rot. As evening deepens, the reactions shift. A pious monk in coarse robes pauses to pray aloud, his words a murmur of Latin that floats up like incense, offering spiritual pity even as he shakes his head at your sins. Nearby, a noble lady on horseback, her veil billowing, averts her eyes in feigned horror but lingers just long enough to whisper to her attendant, her glee masked as moral outrage. You feel the judgment in every glance, of pity from the downtrodden who see their own fragility reflected, the glee from those secure in their stations, reveling in another's fall. Sensory immersion deepens, the flicker of torchlight as dusk falls, casting warm glows on upturned faces, the rustle of skirts and cloaks as people shuffle closer, the faint taste of dust kicked up by passing carts, settling on your parched tongue. Scholars openly debate whether these spectacles truly unified communities through cathartic judgment or sowed seeds of division by highlighting inequalities and injustice, with some arguing it mirrored ancient Roman games adapted to Christian morals. You ponder this as a family passes below, a father hoisting his child onto shoulders for a better look, using you as a living lesson. See what befalls the wicked. The boy stares wide-eyed, a mix of awe and fear, while the mother clucks disapprovingly, her pity evident in a hurried sign of the cross. Another light joke bubbles up. If this were a school field trip, you'd be exhibit in Don't Do Crime 101 educational, but 0 stars for comfort. The mob's voices layer into judgment's chorus, gleeful chants from rowdy youths forming a circle to dance mockingly, their steps thumping the ground in rhythmic mockery, pitiful sighs from elderly women who remember lost sons to similar fates, dropping wildflowers at the scaffold's base as quiet tributes. One burly smith, perhaps the very one who forged your cage, stands arms crossed, his face a mask of stern approval, but a flicker in his eyes hints at unease. Did he hammer regret into those bars? The spectacle draws all walks, beggars slinking near for scraps tossed in distraction, knights on prancing steeds offering curt nods of endorsement, their armor clinking like metallic applause, as night cloaks the square in velvet darkness, stars pricking overhead like distant witnesses, the reactions quiet but lingo whispers from late-night wanderers. a mix of drunken glee and sober pity echoing off stone walls. You sway in the chill, the cages creak a lonely reply, observing how judgment binds them. Glee in the power of conformity, pity in fleeting empathy. A third light joke softens the night. Talk about crowdsourced therapy. Mob vents their frustrations on you free of charge, while you hang around providing the service. Callbacks echo in your mind, courtrooms verdict fueling this display, the forge's heat now cooled into communal spectacle. The townsfolk's reactions paint a portrait of society, fractured yet united in judgment, the cage not just your prison but their mirror, reflecting fears and follies. Pity flickers like candle flames, easily snuffed by glee's wind, as a lone figure below a widow perhaps lingers to murmur a prayer, her voice a thread of humanity in the web of scorn. The spectacle endures, voices rising anew with dawn's promise. Communal judgment, a living entity that feeds on your humiliation, binding the town tighter than any law. You endure their gaze, each reaction a lash, the gleeful barbs that sting sharper than hunger, the pitiful glances that offer hollow solace. As the moon climbs, silvering the bars, you observe one final group, guards sharing a flask, their laughter subdued, judgment tempered by duty's boredom. The mob disperses, but echoes remain, a haunting chorus in your ears. The cages roll as spectacles cemented in their daily rhythms. Public humiliation thrives here not in silence, but in the voices that judge, pity, and revel, turning personal torment into shared lore. The whispers of the dispersing mob fade into the night, but fragments of their conversations linger in the air like smoke from dying embers, carrying tales of those who came before you, infamous souls whose stories have etched deeper grooves into the legacy of these hanging cages. From your lofty isolation, swaying softly in the chill breeze that rustles distant leaves and carries the faint hoot of an owl, you strain to catch the echoes, piecing together narratives of notorious figures whose fates mirror your own, adding layers of grim folklore to this iron testament of justice. The stars above wink knowingly, as if they've witnessed it all, and in this sleepy cadence, let's drift into their histories, the wind a gentle whisper guiding us through the annals of shame. You imagine the crowd below sharing these stories around hearth fires, their voices low and laced with awe, passing on legends that turn real men into cautionary phantoms. Take William Wallace, the Scottish rebel whose defiance against Edward I in the late 13th century sealed his doom. Captured in 1305, he was dragged through London's streets, hanged until near death, then disemboweled and beheaded, his quartered remains gibbeted across cities like Newcastle and Berwick to crush any spark of uprising. You feel the echo of that spectacle here, the cage creaking as if in sympathy, the metallic scent sharp in your nostrils mingling with imagined blood on cobblestones. A mainstream historical fact settles heavy. Wallace's execution and display were part of Edward's campaign to subdue Scotland, with records from the time showing such public exposures aimed at deterring rebellion, as chronicled in royal accounts. As the moon climbs higher, bathing your bars in silvery light that casts eerie shadows on the ground below, another tale surfaced. Spencer the Younger, the despised favorite of Edward II, whose greed and cruelty led to his downfall in 1326. Betrayed and captured during a rebellion, he was drawn on a hurdle to Hereford, hanged from a towering 50-foot gallows, castrated while still alive, his entrails burned before him, then quartered, with his head spiked on London Bridge and body parts sent to distant towns for display in chains. You shiver, not just from the cold seeping through the iron, but from the sensory ghost of it, the roar of the jeering mob, the acrid smoke of burning flesh wafting up, the clank of chains echoing his final swing. Modern Aceitites like a medieval blockbuster villain getting his comeuppance, but with zero special effects budget and all too real consequences. The stories weave on, pulling you deeper into the legacy. As a quirky tidbit emerges from fringe whispers, some believe the gibbeted remains of traitors like Spencer could curse those who mocked them too boldly, causing crops to fail or illnesses to strike. turning the cage into a supernatural booby trap that villagers avoided after dark. You chuckle softly to yourself, dangling there. Imagine if these cages came with warning labels: caution, may contain vengeful spirits, approach at own risk. Gentle sarcasm eases in. Ah, the original haunted house attraction, where the ghosts are complimentary with your ticket to terror. Scholars openly debate whether parading such notorious figures in cages or chains truly quelled dissent or merely fanned the flames of resentment, with some arguing it symbolized royal overreach that fueled further revolts like the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. You ponder this as dawn's first light creeps over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, the town stirring below with the clatter of shutters opening and roosters crowing a raspy greeting. Another figure haunts your thoughts: Dafydd ap Gruffydd, the last Prince of Wales, executed in 1283 as the first recorded victim of full hanging, drawing, and quartering, dragged to Shrewsbury, hanged briefly, revived to watch his bowels burned, then beheaded and quartered, his head crowned with ivy in mockery and displayed on the Tower of London, limbs gibbeted York, Bristol, and elsewhere. Sensory details flood in: the rough drag of the hurdle over uneven ground, the metallic tang of fierce sweat, the distant toll of bells marking his end. These echoes add profound layers to the cage's legacy, transforming it from mere metal into a repository of royal wrath and rebel defiance. You feel the weight of their stories pressing against your own confinement, the bars seeming to hum with accumulated shame. A light joke slips through the Hazif history books had ratings. These guys would get 5 stars for drama, but 0 for happy endings. As the morning crowd begins to gather again, vendors hawking pies whose steam rises like offerings to the spectacle, you overhear more: Andrew Harclay, the Earl turned traitor in 1323, who negotiated with the Scots behind Edward II's backhand, drawn and quartered at Carlisle, his parts gibbeted at the city's gates and sent to London, Newcastle, and Shrewsbury as stark warnings. His story, whispered with a mix of scorn and reluctant admiration, underscores how even nobles weren't spared the cage's embrace. The sun climbs, warming the iron until it tingles against your skin, a brief respite from night's bite, while birds wheel overhead, their cries piercing the air like accusatory arrows. These notorious figures' tales blend with your torment, their legacies breathing life into the rust-flecked Barswalace's unyielding spirit. Despensers fall from favor, Dafydd's princely pride shattered, Harclay's fatal ambition. Each adds a stratum to the grim narrative, showing how the hanging cage wasn't just punishment but propaganda, a swinging billboard of the king's unyielding grip. Another quirky echo: fringe beliefs held that touching a gibbeted traitor's bone could cure ailments or grant luck in battle, leading daring souls to pilfer fragments under cover of night, turning horror into hidden talismans. You sway gently, the motion hypnotic in this ASMR flow, as modern asides flicker. Think of it as medieval social media, where going viral meant your remains scattered across the kingdom for maximum exposure. The legacy deepens with each passing hour, the crowd below now reciting these stories like bedtime fables gone wrong, children wide-eyed as parents point up at you, linking your fate to those echoes. A third light joke bubbles up: if these famous victims had agents, they'd demand royalties for every rattling talk about post-mortem fame. As midday heat builds, sweat trickling down your back in itchy rivulets, the sensory tapestry enriches, the sizzle of meat from a nearby spit, the murmur of storytellers embellishing details, until Wallace becomes a giant, Despenser a demon. These figures' punishments layered the cage's reputation, from deterrent to symbol of tyranny, their stories surviving in ballads and chronicles that outlast the flesh. Callbacks resonate: Forge's hammer shaping not just metal but destiny, the courtroom's verdict echoing in royal edicts that doomed these men. The grim legacy unfolds, a tapestry of terror where each thread is a life suspended, humiliated, and remembered, adding inexorable depth to your own endless display. Twilight approaches again, the sky bruising into purples, and you cling to these echoes, finding odd companionship in their notoriety. The hanging cage, once a simple tool, now pulses with their layered histories. Favorites, princes, are also reduced to swinging warnings, their tales whispered eternally below. In this suspended realm, their legacies wrap around you like the chains themselves, a grim chorus that amplifies the punishment's reach across time. Twilight deepens into a velvet shroud, the last echoes of those notorious tales fading with the crowd's footsteps, leaving you alone in the hanging cage to sway like a forgotten pendulum. Under the emerging stars, their distant twinkles mocking your isolation as the chill night air nips at your exposed skin. Up here, with the town's lanterns flickering to life below like hesitant fireflies, your mind wanders beyond the immediate torment, drifting into the shadows of deeper questions, pondering the very purpose of this iron cradle of cruelty, whether it truly keeps the peace or merely feeds a darker hunger in society's soul. The wind whispers through the bars, carrying faint scents of wood smoke from distant chimneys. And in this ASMR hush, let's ease into the debates that swirl around these cages. Your thoughts a gentle current pulling you through history's murky waters. You reflect on the cage's supposed role as a deterrent, imagining the king's advisors huddled in candlelit chambers, quills scratching parchments, as they justify such spectacles with claims of preventing crime through fear alone. Feel the subtle rock of your perch, the chain's soft creak sensing with your breathing, as you weigh the arguments. On one side, proponents whisper that seeing a body worse, a living soul whether in public view stamps obedience into the hearts of the masses, turning potential thieves or rebels into model subjects overnight. Sensory details ground you, faint rustle of bats flitting nearby, the metallic aftertaste on your tongue from days without proper drink, the distant bark of a dog echoing your inner unrest. Modern aside, it's like those anti-smoking ads with graphic images, but medieval style skip the warnings, go straight to the horror show. Yet doubts creep in like fog over the moors, challenging if this brutality really curbs wrongdoing, or just masks deeper societal ills. You ponder how the cage might amplify cruelty, turning communities into audiences complicit in the suffering, where pity dissolves under the weight of collective judgment. A mainstream historical fact emerges from the haze in 14th century England, as detailed in legal records from Edward II's reign. Public displays like gibbeting were escalated during times of unrest, such as after the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, to visibly assert royal authority and discourage uprisings, with chroniclers noting fewer reported rebellions in heavily policed areas. But here's the quirky tidbit: belief held that the cages harbored deterrent demons, supernatural entities summoned by the condemned's final curses, which supposedly scared off not just criminals but also innocent travelers, leading to abandoned roads and eerie local legends of haunted gibbets. You chuckle faintly to yourself, the sound lost in the night's embrace. Imagine if these demons unionized, ending better working conditions like softer chains or prime haunting hours. Gentle sarcasm lingers on medieval psychology at play, where fear is the therapist and the cage its couch. But good luck getting an appointment without a royal warrant. As the moon rises higher, bathing your confines in pale light that turns the bars into silvery veins, you delve deeper into the scholarly fray, where voices from across centuries clash like swords in a dimly lit hall. Scholars openly debate whether the hanging cage's effectiveness as a deterrent outweighed its contribution to societal cruelty, with some contending it fostered a culture of desensitization that eroded empathy, potentially sparking more violence in the long run, while others argue it was a necessary evil in an era without prisons, drawing parallels to continental practices like the French exposure on wheels. Your mind wanders through these arguments as exhaustion tugs at you, the cage's confines pressing closer in the quiet, forcing introspection amid the physical ache. Picture the proponents, historians poring over dusty tomes, citing how crime rates dipped in towns with frequent displays. The sight of swaying cages at gates serving as silent sentinels that whispered turn back to would-be malefactors. Counterpoints rise, soft light, cruelty angle, where the cage isn't just punishment, but a mirror to society's barbarism, humiliating not only the victim but the onlookers who revel in it, breeding resentment that simmers beneath feudal loyalty. Sensory immersion deepens, the cool dew forming on the iron, dripping slowly like tears, the faint hum of crickets below, a natural lullaby contrasting your turmoil, each of chafed skin reminding you of the human cost in these debates. A light joke bubbles up in the stillness. If deterrence worked perfectly, we'd all be saints by now, but hey, at least the birds get a free meal plan out of it. You shift slightly, the bars digging in as a reminder, pondering how effectiveness is measured by the absence of crime or the presence of fear that stifles even harmless dissent. The shadows lengthen, debates unfolding in your thoughts like pages turning in a forbidden book. Did the cage prevent theft by scaring the poor? Or did it exacerbate poverty by isolating families of the condemned, pushing them toward desperation? Modern parallels flicker. Think of it as ancient shock therapy for society, zapping bad behavior but risking short circuits in the moral wiring. As pre-dawn gray creeps in, birds stirring with tentative chirps that pierce the quiet, you weigh the cruelty's toll not just on you swinging here as exhibitor, but on the fabric of the era. Proponents might point to royal edicts that praised such methods for maintaining order amid wars and famines, but critics highlight the psychological scars, how public shaming warped communal bonds into chains of suspicion. Another quirky fringe floats by. Some alchemists claimed the cages transmuted human suffering into aura of obedience, a mystical energy that blanketed the town, deterring evil spirits. Alongside criminals talk about turning leaden hearts into gold standard loyalty. You smirk weakly. If only they'd bottled that aura, it'd outsell ale at the tavern. Scholars' voices echo louder in your mind, debating if this was true deterrence or performative savagery, with evidence from parish records showing mixed results. Crimes persisted, but perhaps shifted to shadows away from the cage's gaze. Gentle sarcasm whispers, brilliant plans scare folks so much they innovate better hiding spots for their misdeeds. The wind picks up, rustling your tattered clothes like ghostly hands, as you consider the human element, cruelty breeding more of itself, where children raised on such sights grow numb, perpetuating the cycle. A third light joke eases the weight. Debating this is like arguing if kale smoothies work, sir. They're deterrent enough to skip breakfast altogether. Dawn breaks fully, the sun's rays warming the iron gradually, steam rising from damp bars as the town awakens once more. Your ponderings circle back, effectiveness versus cruelty, a shadow dance where deterrence claims victory in quiet streets, but societal wounds fester unseen. Callbacks surface, famous victims' legacies fueling these arguments, their cages symbols in the scholarly arena. Did it work, this iron grip on fear, or did it merely cloak cruelty in justice's robes, eroding the soul of the kingdom one swing at a time? The debates rage on in your thoughts, as endless as your display, casting long shadows over history's judgment. You hang there, mind adrift in these intellectual currents, the cage a pivotal point in the discursant or destroyer, beacon of order or bonfire of empathy. As the first villagers stir below, their murmurs resuming the daily spectacle, you realize the true cruelty might lie in the uncertainty, the endless questioning that offers no escape from the shadows. The stars fade as morning light seeps in, pulling you from those shadowy debates back to the creak of your cage, where the first rays warm the iron just enough to chase away the night's deepest chill, but not the lingering questions about cruelty's grip on this world. You sense a shift on the horizon, not just in the sky's blush but in the era itself. As laws evolve and morals stir like waking giants, the hanging cage begins its slow descent into obscurity, pushed into history's forgotten corners where terror twilight gives way to tentative mercy. Down below, the town bustles anew, but whispers among the crowd hint at changing tides, fewer spectacles like yours, more murmurs of reform as thinkers and rulers question the old ways. Sensory whispers envelop youth, faint chirp of awakening birds blending with the distant hammer of a farrier, the earthy scent of dew-kissed grass rising to meet you, a gentle reminder that time marches on, even for instruments of fear like this one. You imagine the winds of change starting small, perhaps in the halls of Parliament where barons and bishops convene under vaulted ceilings, their voices echoing off stone as they draft edicts that soften the edges of justice. Feel the subtle sway of your perch sensing with these shifts, the chains growing fainter as if echoing the practice's decline. In the late 14th century, after upheavals like the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, where common folk rose against oppressive taxes and serfdom, the crown begins to rethink public humiliations that might fuel rather than quell unrest. Cages still swing, but less frequently, as imprisonment in dank towers or fines gain favor for lesser crimes. Modern aside, it's like upgrading from dial-up to broadband in punishment tech, slower, but less likely to crash the whole system with backlash. As the sun climbs higher, baking the bars until they tingle against your skin, you trace the decline further into the 15th century, where the Wars of the Roses ravaged the land with noble infighting, diverting attention from petty displays to battlefield pragmatics. Executions persist, but the elaborate gibbeting wanes, bodies buried quicker or heads spiked briefly on bridges, rather than prolonged in cages that require maintenance and guards. A mainstream historical fact anchors this fade. By the Tudor era under Henry VII in the late 1400s, statutes like the Treason Act of 1495 streamlined punishments, favoring swift hangings over extended exposures to avoid breeding sympathy or rebellion, as evidenced in royal proclamations shifting toward more humane efficiency. Yet, the quirky tidbit lingers. Fringe tales from rural folklore speak of cage ghosts resisting the decline, where dismantled gibbets were said to reassemble under full moons, creaking warnings to blacksmiths who forged them, blending superstition with a reluctance to let go of old fears. You chuckle softly to yourself, the sound swallowed by the wind. Imagine those ghosts unionizing for job security, picket signs reading swing back to tradition. Gentle sarcasm drifts in. Progress in medieval times, where evolving morals means trading eternal shame for just a quick drop bargain bin justice. Anyone. The crowd below thins mid-morning, vendors packing unsold wares as rain clouds gather, promising a drenching that once amplified your misery but now feels like a harbinger of erasure for the cage itself. Sensory details deepen. The patter of first drops on the iron like tentative applause for change, the fresh petrichor rising from the earth, mingling with the metallic tang on your tongue as water trickles down the bars, pooling at your feet before vanishing. Pushing into the 16th century, you envision the Renaissance's humanist whispers infiltrating England's courts, scholars like Thomas More penning utopias that question barbaric displays. Even as he himself faces the axe under Henry VIII, morals evolve amid religious upheavals to Reformation splintering faith, prompting rulers to favor penance over public wrath, with cages relegated to pirates and traders on distant coasts rather than town squares. You feel the decline in the lessening jeers. Fewer children point up at you, more adults hurry past with averted eyes, as if the spectacle has lost its luster. Scholars openly debate whether this twilight stemmed from genuine moral awakening or pragmatic shifts in power dynamics, with some arguing Enlightenment ideals trickled down early, eroding cruelty, while others contend economic factors like rising labor costs for executions simply made cages obsolete. The afternoon wears on, shadows lengthening as the rain eases into a mist that cloaks the town in a hazy veil, softening the outlines of rooftops and making your cage feel like a relic adrift in time. By the Elizabethan age, acts like the Poor Laws of 1597 redirect focus to workhouses and vagrancy reforms, diminishing the need for visible deterrence as society grapples with poverty's roots rather than its symptoms. You trace threads to the 17th century, where civil wars under Charles I shatter old certainties, parliamentarian forces decrying royal excesses including elaborate punishment cages dismantled, Their iron repurposed for cannons in the fray. Another light joke slips in. Talk about recycling, turning tools of terror into boomsticks. Eco-friendly tyranny, medieval edition. As dusk approaches, the sky a canvas of bruised oranges and purples. You ponder the moral push. Philosophers like John Locke later in the century planting seeds of individual rights that bloom into abhorrence for such degradations, influencing laws that favor trials over spectacles. Sensory immersion, bilge cooling air carrying hints of baking bread from inns below, a comforting aroma contrasting your hunger, the distant lowing of cattle herded home, a pastoral rhythm underscoring the shift from agrarian fears to urban enlightenments. The quirky fringe resurfaces in tales of liberated souls, where villagers claimed dismantling a cage released benevolent spirits that blessed crops, turning decline into a folkloric festival of renewal rather than loss. You sway gently, the motion hypnotic as night encroaches, lanterns igniting below like stars fallen to earth. The decline accelerates into the 18th century, Georgian reforms under figures like Cesare Beccaria's writings filtering across the channel, decrying disproportionate punishments and advocating proportionalities vanish from statutes, replaced by transportation to colonies or brief pillory stints. A third light joke bubbles up. If punishments were fashion, hanging cages would be that outdated frock coton's trendy, now tucked in history's attic gathering dust. But in truth, evolving laws weave with morals. The American Revolution's echoes of liberty rebounding to England, pushing for dignity even in justice, as public opinion sours on spectacles that once united but now divide. Callbacks flicker famous victims' stories, now moral lessons in reform texts, the debates of effectiveness fueling abolitionist fires. By the 19th century, Victorian sensibilities seal the fate. Acts like the Punishment of Death Act 1832 reduced capital crimes, gibbeting abolished outright in 1834 after outcries over its barbarity. Cages melted down or rusting in museums as curiosities. You feel the phantom weight lifting, though your own torment lingers in this time bubble. Morals push relentlessly. Humanitarian movements, inspired by evangelical zeal, decry the soul-crushing aspect, favoring rehabilitation over rot. As full dark settles, the wind a soft sigh through the bars, you trace the final push into obscurity. 20th century reflections branding it as medieval madness. Laws worldwide echoing England's turn toward privacy and punishment. The practice fades into dark corners, a twilight where terror yields to tentative light, leaving echoes in folklore but no place in the present code. Sensory fade, the quiet hush of the sleeping town, your breath sensing with the ear's exhale. Evolving laws and morals entwine, shoving the hanging cage into history's shadows, where it rusts as a warning not to the condemned, but to future generations about the perils of unchecked cruelty. You hang on, mind adrift in this decline, the cage of vestige swinging toward irrelevance, as the world below dreams of kinder dawns. The world below stirs into those kinder dawns, the cages sway growing fainter in your imagination as the mists of time swirl around you once more, pulling you gently from the medieval chill back toward the hum of the present, where streetlights flicker on paved roads and the distant roar of cars replaces the creak of wooden carts. You feel the shift like a soft exhale, the iron bars dissolving into ether as your boots touch solid ground, not muddied cobblestones, but the smooth concrete of a modern city sidewalk. The air thick with exhaust and coffee from a nearby cafe instead of wood smoke and refuse. As a time traveler returning home, you blink against the neon glow, heart still echoing the cage's rhythm, contemplating how those ancient echoes of humiliation persist, woven subtly into today's tapestry of shame and justice, reminding us that history doesn't fade, it lingers in the shadows of our laws and social scrolls. You wander down a bustling avenue, the present unfolding in vibrant chaos, smartphones buzzing in pockets, billboards flashing ads that promise perfection, and crowds scrolling through feeds where reputations rise and fall with a single post. Sensory details rush and warm buzz of your phone vibrating with notifications, The salty tang of street food vendors hawking pretzels, the distant siren wailing like a modern herald of judgment. Here in the 21st century, the hanging cage may rust in museums, but its spirit swings on in digital gibbets, social media cancellations, where one misstep leads to viral shaming, mobs gathering not in squares, but comment sections, hurling digital rotten fruit that stains reputations forever. Modern ascetites like the cage went viral, upgraded to Wi-Fi, where exposure happens at the speed of likes rather than the creak of chains. As you sip a latte from a paper cup, steam curling lazily upward, you reflect on how public humiliation endures, repackaged for our era. Think of celebrity scandals splashed across tabloids or online forums, where the accused dangle in the court of public opinion, their lives dissected by anonymous judges. A mainstream historical fact ties it back. In contemporary justice systems, practices like sex offender registries or public shaming sentences as wearing signs admitting crime medieval displays, with U.S. courts occasionally mandating them since the 1990s under community notification laws, aiming to deter through visibility much like the old gibbets. But the quirky tidbit adds a twist, freeing online communities collect digital relics from cancelled figures, like archived tweets preserved in blockchain cages, believed by some conspiracy enthusiasts to trap virtual souls in eternal loops, blending tech superstition with ancient exposure fears. You chuckle softly to yourself, leaning against a lamppost as rain begins to patter on the awning overhead. Imagine if your medieval self could see the swapping iron bars for firewalls. But the shame game remains the same, just with better graphics. Gentle sarcasm whispers in progress, where we traded public stocks for stock photos of regret, all while claiming enlightenment. The rain intensifies, drumming a rhythmic lull on the pavement, nearing the sensory haze of your journey. As you ponder deeper, does this lingering humiliation serve justice? Or does it perpetuate cycles of cruelty under new guises? Scholars openly debate whether modern shaming mechanisms, from doxing to restorative justice circles, effectively rehabilitate or merely evolve the cage's cruelty, with some arguing they foster accountability in a connected world, while others contend they erode privacy and amplify inequality. Drawing lines from historical precedents to today's algorithmic amplifications. Pushing onward through the drizzle, umbrella-less but undeterred, you pass a courthouse, its marble steps slick and imposing, where trials unfold behind closed doors rather than in open squares. Yet echoes resound in live-streamed verdicts or body cam footage shared online, turning private pain public once more. Feel the cool droplets tracing down your neck, a call back to the cage's relentless weather, now softened by the option to duck into a bookstore for shelter. Inside, surrounded by shelves groaning with tomes on psychology and law, you flip through pages that dissect shame's power, how it binds societies, but can shatter individuals. Much like those medieval displays intended to unify but often bred resentment. Another light joke bubbles up: of shame were currency, we'd all be billionaires by now, minting it fresh daily on our feeds. The present justice system unfolds in your mind as you browse. Prisons hidden from view, focusing on rehabilitation over spectacle, yet public elements persist. Parole hearings broadcasted, mugshots eternally searchable online, ensuring humiliation outlives senses. You inhale the musty scent of old books, fingers trailing spines that whisper of reforms. Movements like Metu exposing abusers through collective voices. A digital mob that deters, but risks overreach, echoing the crowd's glee from centuries past. Sensory comfort envelops soft rustle of pages turning, the distant hum of a coffee machine brewing solace, grounding you in this era where shame is weaponized not with iron but information. Venturing out again, the rain easing into a misty veil that blurs city lights into halos, you contemplate global variations. In some cultures, restorative practices circle back to community healing, shunning the cage's isolation for dialogue, while others cling to public floggings or online blacklists, that swing like virtual pendulums. A third light joke eases in. Talk about recycling history who ditched the cages but kept the hang-ups, now with premium subscriptions for premium shame. But seriously, in this ASMR flow, let's linger on the positives. Awareness grows, with activists pushing for dignity and justice, reforming laws to protect against undue exposure, turning echoes into lessons rather than legacies of pain. Night falls fully, street lamps casting golden pools on wet sidewalks as you head home, the city's pulse slowing to a rhythmic drum of traffic and laughter from passing bars. You unlock your door, the click familiar and reassuring, stepping into warmth that banishes the last medieval chill. Reflections deepen on your couch, remote in hand flipping through documentaries that trace punishments, evolution from gibbets to gigabytes, highlighting how humiliation's echoes warn us to balance justice with compassion. Callback surface. The forge's fire now in pixels, the courtroom's verdict in upvotes, the cages sway in scrolling feeds. Yet, hope glimmers. Modern reforms like expungement laws erase digital stains, offering second chances the past denied. You sink into pillows, eyelids heavy, contemplating how understanding these echoes equips us to dismantle lingering cruelties, fostering a world where shame educates rather than erodes. The present, with its flaws, swings toward empathy, leaving the cage as a cautionary relic in history's museum, its lessons etched not in iron, but in our collective conscience. As the echoes of that ancient cage fade softly into the quiet corners of your mind like whispers carried away on a gentle evening breeze that rustles the curtains in your dimly lit room, you find yourself settling deeper into the cushions, the weight of the day's reflections lifting ever so lightly, allowing a sense of calm to wrap around you like a warm, familiar blanket fresh from the dryer. The world outside your window hums with the distant sounds of life continuing, cars gliding smoothly along rain-slicked streets, leaves murmuring in the wind, and the occasional soft coo of a night bird calling from a nearby tree, all blending into a soothing symphony that reassures you everything is in its place. No sharp edges or lingering shadows to disturb the peace settling over your thoughts. You've journeyed through time's darker paths, witnessing the slow unraveling of cruelty's grip, and now as your breaths lengthen and deepen, matching the rhythmic rise and fall of the world winding down, you can release those images, letting them dissolve into harmless mist, fading gently until only a faint, educational glow remains, a quiet reminder that humanity learns, grows, and softens with each passing era. Close your eyes now, dear listener, and let the final traces of that story drift away on the currents of sleep, carrying you toward dreams filled with light and possibility, where justice whispers kindly and shame is but a distant, forgotten echo. Rest well, wrapped in tranquility, until morning's soft light greets you anew.